Morning. I'm Latari Canty, the Associate Dean of Intercultural Engagement and Director of the Space Intercultural Center. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am a co-lead for the MIT Day of Dialogue.
Good morning. I'm Jason McKnight, Assistant Director for the Department Support Program of Mind, Hand, Heart. My pronouns are he, him, his. I am also the co-lead of MIT Day of Dialogue. And we are looking forward to this day of dialogue focused on race and anti-racism. Before we start the day, we think it is important to acknowledge the Indigenous peoples as the traditional stewards of the land where each of us are today and the enduring relationship that exists between them and their traditional territories. The land on which MIT sits today is the traditional unceded territory of the Wampanoag Nation. We want to specifically acknowledge the painful history of genocide and forced removal from this territory, and we honor and respect the many diverse Indigenous people connected to this land on which we gather for time memorial.
We would like to thank the Planning Committee, Scott Alessandro, Sandy Alexander, Beatrice Cantata, Nina Diagrella, Martha Edison, Kelvin Green II, Emma Johnson, Heather Konar, Bianca Lippe, Libby Mahaffey, Rachel Ordnance, and James Reed for their labor of love in bringing this day to fruition. We also want to acknowledge the work of those behind the scenes, helping us to manage this day, like MIT AV and the volunteers assisting with the concurrent session. We would like to thank our featured presenters, Dr. Darnisa Amante-Jackson, Dr. Heather Hackman, and Dr. Crystal Fleming, and the presenters of the 23 other sessions being offered today for the wisdom they will share and their willingness to help our community become stronger. We would be remiss to not thank those offices that have financially supported this event, without whom today would not have been possible. The Division of Student Life, Human Resources, the Institute Community and Equity Office, Mind, Hand, Heart, and Sloan School of Management.
And thank you to you, the participants, and especially the managers that encourage their colleagues to be here. We want to acknowledge the positive message you all have sent by devoting time to this work. Today has been created to serve as a catalyst of new energy to continue the ongoing conversation that is necessary for MIT to become a truly anti-racist community. It is a response, but not the response, to the national movement and the community movement happening at MIT. While there is movement, many feel paralyzed, whether just entering the conversation or having been forced into the conversation for their entire lives. The day is intended to be an opportunity to move beyond this paralysis through conversation.
We know that there are people in our community suffering and questioning their place at MIT. We hope that today can serve as an example of many to come, that we hear you and that you belong here. Over 900 community members have registered for today, close to triple the amount of previous events like this. There's a desire to engage, and we want today to support and foster that desire.
As we look to engage each other in difficult conversations, there are a few things that we would like you to keep in mind. First, breathe. Take a breath. In this moment, right now, take a long breath in and let it out. These conversations are challenging. Many are coming into these conversations with pain, fear, nervousness, and some excitement. Remember to breathe. Take time before entering a session. Take in a breath during a session. Whenever you feel yourself tense up, breathe. Sometimes a pause is needed, and that may mean taking a break from a session.
And it's okay to take a break. These conversations are hard and take a toll. We need to be aware of when we need to check in with ourselves or with our support network. Someone may say something that makes you extremely uncomfortable. It's okay to engage them or to leave the conversation. We are all bringing different energy, lived experiences, and knowledge into this space. Some of us are exhausted while some are newly energized. It's important to be aware of what you bring into the space, consider what others may bring with them, and be conscious of what you leave behind.
We ask that when you choose to engage, you are listening to understand, not judge. Consider what your next question will be versus your next statement. We ask that you enter the space with a learning mindset and the knowledge that there will most likely be others in the space recovering from harm. The point is not to be silent, but to instead be thoughtful when engaging with others.
We need to be willing to take risks, make mistakes, and sit with our discomfort. Each and every one of you has a place in this conversation. Every one of your voices matters.
The schedule for the day embodies the need for a continued conversation through our intentional choice to leave the day open-ended without a closing speaker. We have asked the presenters to begin each session with community agreements and encourage all presenters and attendees to include their pronouns in their name that is displayed on the screen. In an effort to assist participants in determining the best session for them, we've asked presenters to indicate one of two tracks: awareness and knowledge, or skill building and action. Awareness and knowledge are programs that are intended to increase a participant's knowledge around race and anti-racism. Skill building and action programs are intended to assist participants in building a new skill and/or taking action. After today, you will receive a post survey as well as resources to help you in continuing the conversation.
And now we will have some remarks from President Rice.
Natari, thank you. Natari and Jason offered many gracious thank yous. I would like to add just one more for them. Natari, I understand that this day of dialogue was your idea. And Jason, I know you were also instrumental in bringing the day to life. So to both of you and to all the members of your planning committee, I thank you on behalf of MIT. And to all of you attending today, I find it deeply meaningful that the inspiration for this event came in effect from you. Natari has worked at MIT for a while, and she understands our community, even when that community is scattered across the country and around the world. In the days and weeks after the killing of George Floyd, she was hearing from students, staff, and faculty who were in pain and who were seeking some way to work through their experiences, including painful experiences at MIT. She was also hearing from department heads and other academic leaders. They wanted to do something locally to help people talk about and learn about systemic racism, but they did not know how. Some people were looking to listen and understand. Others were hoping finally to be heard and to be understood. And so after 5 intense weeks of organizing, this event offers a wonderful opportunity to do those deeply important things together in community. I'm also greatly inspired that this event has attracted so many people from across MIT. At the national level, one reason the current moment feels different, feels hopeful, is that many more people are paying attention. That includes people who, before now, have not fully understood the extent of systemic racism, or who have believed that it was not their issue, or who have cared but have not seen how they could help. But the truth is that since this is a systemic problem, all of us who participate in the system must also participate in making it better, fairer, more equitable, more just. Earlier this summer, I announced a number of steps we're taking to advance racial equity and justice at MIT. Those steps include the work already underway to develop and implement a strategic action plan to support diversity, equity, and inclusion. And in fact, as part of today's program, ICEO John Dozier and Associate Provost Tim Jamieson will hold a conversation for anyone who would like to learn more or discuss the goals. Institutional commitments like this are important, and I'm very optimistic about the strategic action plans because of its emphasis on accountability and results. But I believe we all sense that to do this work effectively now, we must do it together, person to person, as we never have before. We all approach this moment and this work from different backgrounds, with different levels of awareness and different needs. The day's program is designed to be valuable for everyone, whatever your identity or lived experience may be. And so I hope that the Day of Dialogue can provide a welcoming place to join in this personal work together. I hope it can help start new conversations, deepen those already underway, expand our thinking, and sustain the momentum for transformative change. I want to close with just one observation. The last few weeks have been filled with tribute to the exceptional life of the late Congressman John Lewis. He was a person who did not hesitate to point out injustice and who was not afraid to speak the truth to those who needed to hear it. He was also a gifted listener, and he held himself to a remarkable standard of decency, respect, and kindness. So I hope that as we begin this day of dialogue, we can consider John Lewis our inspiration, our guide, and our guest of honor. Thank you all for joining in for what I know will be a memorable occasion and a very important day in the life of MIT. And now I'm happy to turn things over to Nina de Agrila, who will introduce this morning's keynote speaker.
Thank you for your remarks, President Reif. Hello and welcome. My name is Nina de Agrila. I'm the Assistant Dean of Intercultural Engagement for Multicultural Programs here at MIT, and I use the she series pronouns. I am so excited to introduce Dr. Darnisa Amante-Jackson as one of today's key. I had the honor of seeing Dr. Amante-Jackson speak at the White Privilege Symposium last October at Lesley University, where she spoke of her work through her experiences. My colleagues and I still take her words to heart when confronting injustices or interrupting microaggressions. Dr. Amante-Jackson is an educational and racial equity strategist that is deeply committed to the studies of culture, innovation, equity, and adult development. Since earning her master's degree in sociocultural anthropology from Brandeis University and her doctorate from Harvard's Educational Leadership Doctorate, she has honed her knowledge to transform organizations, nonprofits, and schools on issues of equity, diversity, inclusion, and belonging. Dr. Amante-Jackson currently serves as the president and founder of the Disruptive Equity Education Project, also known as DEEP, and DCCP, which is the DEEP Corporate Consulting Partners, where she supports superintendents, teachers, principals, nonprofit leaders, corporations, commercial real estate, and boards to achieve equitable culture and to systematically dismantle oppression. Additionally, Dr. Amante-Jackson serves as the tri-chair to the RIDES Project at Harvard's Graduate School of Education. With RIDES, Dr. Amante-Jackson supports systemic and school-based cultural change and coaching for districts across the nation. Please note, we will be using Slido for the question and answer portion of the keynote. More information will be available after Dr. Amante-Jackson speaks. Now, please help me, albeit virtually, in welcoming Dr. Darnisa Amante-Jackson to this year's MIT's Day of Dialogue.
Good morning, and thank you, everyone. I'm incredibly excited today to engage in a powerful conversation to talk a little bit more about what it's actually going to take to do the dialogue that we're seeking to do. Before I share my slides with everyone, there's just a reminder that you will have a copy of the slides, which will be in Slido for you to follow along with me. But I want to give you an overview of where we're going. Normally, when we think about dialogue, we often think that you just jump right in. And there are some key things that are going to be important for us to know. The first one is to understand what the work of dialoguing to dismantle systems of oppression really means. The second one is the moment when you realize that to truly be in dialogue, it takes a grace bridge. And thirdly, when you sit in the discomfort of this work well, you realize that all of that practice is going to call us to the most difficult conversations we've ever had, but they are worth it because they build our empathy on the other side to continue to dismantle together for a greater good. So that's where we're going. So I'll share my screen now, and I'm excited to go on this journey with you. Thank you to the president for starting with that wonderful introduction around John Lewis. I think it's quite fitting that the first slide in my deck is of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. And I want to start this dialogue by actually pushing on this quote by Dr. King. Yes, I am starting the dialogue by pushing on maybe someone we never thought we'd push back on, but let's start. Dr. King says life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others? I want to reframe that question today. And I want us to lean in and to think about that the fact that this question really has a pre-question before it. I want us to sit in the thought of what will we have to do to ourselves for others. I want to start by offering the DEEP logo. You heard in my introduction that I am the co-founder and president of DEEP, which stands for Disruptive Equity Education Project. And if you notice, our logo is an anagram, meaning the D's and the E's and the P's are flipped. And the reason for that is because whether you were doing root work or whether you were doing tree work, it is deep on both sides. A lot of times when we start to have conversations, we ask people to do what you see on the right. That's the reflection of our logo, right? We want to have external conversations. We want to change community. We want to engage in powerful learning. And oftentimes we want to do all this external work in absence of doing what you see on the left side of this screen, which is the root work, the self work, the harder work. We are often taught that to focus on yourself is selfish. And I want to disrupt that for us too. Has anybody ever wondered why we've been encouraged to never really actually focus on ourselves? You see, today you're going to have all these great conversations. And what I'm telling you is the one thing we all have to sit in is our mortality. We only have one lifetime. And there's only so much you can do in one lifetime towards the dismantling of oppression. Oppression is a system that functions in silence. Its goal is to get within you so that you oppress others. And if you don't pause to ask yourself the harder questions about what you've been taught, not blaming and shaming the folks that may have taught it to you, but what you've been taught, you will unknowingly externalize your biases on people in absence of really getting the change we want. So this presentation today is going to talk about both sides of the work. What can we do to dismantle ourselves for a greater good, to actually build the community and build the conversation that we're really hoping to achieve? And I want to put this all down here with a James Baldwin, sort of like closing it up with a James Baldwin sandwich, right? Which is, not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. If all you ever did in your whole life was dismantle yourself, be in conversation and dialogue with yourself about the deepest pieces of you, to be able to have more courageous external conversations, you have done enough. So I'm not saying that we shouldn't be a part of powerful dialogues and movements, but what I am saying to you is a dialogue with yourself is also a full revolution. I'm managing your expectations. We become biased for the first time, folks, as 6 months old. So if any of you have young children in your life, please know, by 2, your children have absorbed all of your biases, spoken and unspoken. By 3, they can communicate those biases. And by 4 or 5, they are manifesting them. So it is truly worth it to disrupt self, because you end those biases from going on into generation and generation and generation. So what's the thing we're actually trying to dismantle? On your screens, you'll all see the 4 eyes of oppression. This is one of the reasons why dialogue often feels so hard. You see, we don't realize that different people are experiencing the world differently from us. And so we either approach them assuming that they've arrived at the same place you've arrived in, right? And then there's the disbelief. How could you not know? How could you be this old, grow up in this neighborhood, go to insert this school, and still not be aware? Systemic oppression is a system that functions to keep us out of dialogue. The first hard truth, the first hard deep ask is your understanding of this system so that we can push on it, we can challenge it, and we can ask deeper questions of ourselves within it. I'm going to tell us a story because it's a day of dialogue and I'm a storyteller, folks. And so I'm going to tell stories today to help us understand these concepts and to also help you understand what being able to talk about them can lead us to. So this is the story of the fish and the fox. Now, I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York. Shout outs to anybody from New York City. I'm always going to rep Brooklyn. That's home. Though I've lived in New England for a very long time, but Brooklyn will always be home. So this is a story set in Brooklyn of a fox who's best friends with some fish. Now, I know what you're thinking, right? A tree grows in Brooklyn. Yes, we have fox too. I never saw one, but I'm sure there was one there. Now, this fox is a non-code switch sort of fox. Okay, he sounds real Brooklyn, so lean in with me. It always feels good to sound like home. So there's this fox who loves fish. They're his friends, and he's decided that he wants to write a great memoir of how do fox understand fish. So Fox is committed every day to going down to this pond to ask the fish a critical question, to have a critical dialogue every day about what it means to be a fish. So the first day, now for some of you, you need to know this. This fox has opposable thumbs. Imagine he's a cartoon fox because he will be writing, and someone out there is going, Dr. Amante-Jackson, he's got paws. How does this work? This is how it works. So Fox goes down to the pond the first day and he shouts out, "Hey, yo, fish!" And the fish pop their heads out of the water and they say, "What up, Fox?" And Fox says, "Hey, fish, how are the rocks?" And the fish say, I don't know about the rocks. Sometimes we rub our scales on them, we get nice and smooth, and we can swim faster through the pond. So Fox says, all right, fish, rocks, swim. The next week, Fox goes down to the pond and he shouts out, "Hey, yo, fish!" And the fish pop their heads out again and they go, "What up, Fox?" And he says, "How's the sun?" And the fish say, "I don't know, the sun's pretty nice. It puts algae on this pond, and some of us like to eat it, and some of us don't." So this goes on week after week after week, until finally, Fox realizes he hasn't asked the fish the most important question. And he runs back down to the pond, and he shouts out, "Hey, yo, fish!" And the fish pop their heads out, and they say, "What up, Fox?" And fish says, "How's the water?" And the fish sort of lean their heads back and say, "What's water, Fox?" That is exactly what ideological oppression is. It is the water, and we are the fish. Don't ever forget, folks, that the human body is made up of 75% water. And we are porous, aren't we? Which means that water can come in and out of us, even if we didn't know it. So what I'm telling you is, we have been swimming in a water that many of us don't know it's there, but that water is telling us everything about who's smart, who's beautiful, who deserves grace, who deserves to be canceled, who's got the best hair, who never thinks about hair. All of that is in ideological oppression. Institutional oppression is what happens when your water gets codified. So institutional oppression is when your water turns into a policy, it turns into a procedure, It turns into a law-based way of being. So our instructional practices, the laws that dictate, communities that folks live in, all of those things are within institutional oppression. Internalized oppression is the goal of the water. You see, internalized oppression is where implicit bias lives. This is when you swallow the water. And I want to insert a moment of grace for us. It's okay if you didn't know you have water. But once you know, I'm holding you accountable to naming it. Interpersonal oppression is, imagine a little kid filling their cheeks up with water. That's the micro and macroaggression. That's when you spit your water on someone and you don't realize you're doing it. And it is also when you realize you're doing it. A microaggression comes from our unconscious bias. It's the offhanded statement that you make that you didn't know could hurt people, but it does, right? So comments, for example, as a Black woman, I often hear statements all the time when people tell me, Dr. Amante-Jackson, you're so articulate. Now, I understand the compliment, but my push with love is, do you know that that compliment comes from water? You see, by telling me I'm so articulate, the microaggression is almost as if you didn't expect me to be. That's when you ask someone, where are you from? No, where are you really from? Now, some of you are looking at the screen going, Dr. Amante, I'm a curious person. I like to give compliments. So I'm not shaming you for things like asking folks where they're from or even telling me I'm articulate. But what I am telling you is that the impact of those statements is harmful because it makes people feel like they don't belong, and it makes people think that they're not intelligent in the first place. See, the macroaggression is overt. That's the thing you shout out really loud, and you believe it. We see a lot more microaggressions than we do macroaggressions, but they both equally hurt. So why this chart? You see, the first goal in your dialogue is you have to ask yourself, what water have you swallowed? How is that water showing up and manifesting in your own system? It doesn't matter whether you are white or a person of color or purple. Everybody has water. No one's hands are clean here. And it's important to own that. That's our common starting point. To be human is to be biased. There's nothing wrong with being biased. There's something wrong with not acknowledging the bias and trying to become aware. Here's a really great way to think about it, because I know this is my MIT community, right? So I'm a science and math kid. I know, surprise, maybe not surprise for some of you who know me personally, but here's a really great analogy that I like to use when I think about this. One of the most important things, like I was mid-analogy and I lost it. It's gonna come back to me, but it's a good science one, I promise, right? When you're asking yourself about the water, remember that's our goal. We wanna own it. It's back to me. So let's think about math, right? Math has this really awesome concept called the level of automaticity. You know what that is? So if I asked all of you, what's 5 times 6? You'd shout 30. 7 times 5, 35, right? You don't have to think about it. That is the goal of bias. The goal of bias is to create a level of automaticity within you so that as soon as you see someone, as soon as you see a situation, you make a snap decision without thinking about it. You don't even know that you've made the decision, but just that thing that you did could be detrimental, caustic, devastating to someone else. So the goal of dialogue is to build empathy so that you are pausing your level of automaticity. Before you do something, the goal is for you to think about it first. Now, even if you still do it, that's a different conversation. But the first step is disrupt the automaticity and insert a pause. That's what dialogue does for us. It inserts a pause. So I want to tell you a story about a really difficult dialogue that I had that made me even feel like it was important to have this conversation across lines of difference, right? Sometimes we think only white community needs the dialogue, and that's not true. I started by telling you this system lives everywhere, and it lives in everyone. That the goal of ideological oppression is to oppress you internally so that you manifest your oppressions on other people in micro and macro aggressive ways that sustains this system. So I'm going to tell you the story about what happened to me in elementary school, the first time I realized the system was real. And you know, back then I didn't have language for it. I didn't know how to have a conversation. I felt paralyzed. You can hear me getting a little emotional about it now, right? I felt angry. And I will tell you the stories I will tell today. They won't be easy ones to hear, but I love you enough to tell you them because there are wonderful things that can happen on the other side of discomfort. So I was in class. I was in elementary school. I'm not going to implicate the grade because I'm not here to implicate people. But I'll tell you, I was in elementary school and I had just raised my hand. And I was, waving my hand super high up in the air. My teacher had asked what I thought was the easiest question in the whole world. And so I'm waving, waving, waving. And finally, my teacher turns to me and she said, Darnisa, what do you want to be when you grow up? Oh, y'all, I was ready. This was the question I had waited for my entire life, at least up until that point in elementary school. And so I jumped out of my chair and I took a deep breath and I said, well, I want to be an anthropologist. I want to be a scientist. I want to be an astrophysicist, maybe a chemist. I'm not sure. Sometimes I want to be a writer, but I don't know. I want to do everything. I want to go to the Mars, but I don't want to be the first person that goes to Mars because the first people always die. So I want to be the third person, right? But I definitely want to go to another planet and I want to change the world. Okay, that's it. Now, you know that feeling when you've just shared the deepest part of yourself with someone and you're anxious about their reception. You kind of start rocking back and forth and you're like, oh. So I'm looking at my teacher and she's looking at me and the rest of the class is looking at us because this is an uncomfortable moment now. This has been about 45 seconds. And I didn't know what to say. And finally, my teacher did something I never thought she would do. She put her hands on her belly. She threw her head back and she started hysterically laughing. She laughed so long and so hard that she had tears rolling down her eyes, kind of like, ooh, ooh. The entire class was laughing with her. And at the end of her tears, she looked up and said to me, Darnisa, little chocolatey Black girls like you from East New York don't do anything but grow up and get pregnant. So why don't you tell us who you really want to be when you grow up? I slid back in my chair. I mean, what do you say to something like that? I was younger than 10 when it happened. I didn't feel like I had agency to push back on my teacher, but I don't know, maybe I've been feisty from the beginning. Maybe that's the Brooklyn in me, right? So I sat down and then I just started getting angry. I didn't have tools. Of course, I was a child, right? This was an adult and I still didn't have tools. And I just remember getting upset. And I just remembered in that moment, I felt like if I didn't say something, if I didn't let the impact be known of that statement, that I would never forgive myself for that. what I didn't mention is in the story, I also told her I wanted to go to Harvard. I was like, yeah, I want to go to Harvard. And I just remembered as she laughed, she turned back around. She started teaching again. Okay. The conversation was over. And I just remembered I had to say something. And so that's what I did. I sat there and, book covers, right? If any of you are old enough to remember book covers, I come from a family where I'm one of the first to go to high school. I have people in my family who are illiterate and don't know how to read, didn't know how to read. I grew up learning how to read by reading some of my family members their bills. And I just remembered, those laminated Ivy League book covers, they used to cost $8 for the whole pack. This is in the 80s, right? So that was a big investment for some folks in my family. And I had Harvard on my English book, I had Yale on my math book. Like, of course, I didn't know, right? But I was just rubbing that Harvard book cover because I just knew I was going to be somebody, even if she didn't believe it. And so I finally took the book and slammed it on the table. And I said, "Miss," right? Slammed it. My grandma said, "I'm going to be whoever I want to be when I grow up." A little expletive coming. I'm telling our interpreter team, right? And I'm like, and if you don't like it, you can kiss my ass, miss. Okay. So now the whole class is going, ooh, right? I got called to the principal's office. I almost got suspended for it. My grandparents and family came down to the school and we got it all resolved, right? I was not suspended because we explained what really happened. But fast forward 15 years. See, here's the thing about people who don't know they have water. You can create an internalized condition within me with your water. So for 15 years, even though I knew I was smart, even though I knew I had the skills, I had my own internalized oppression. That's that water again. My internalized oppression was imposter syndrome. I spent 15 years of my life believing that I wasn't supposed to be in the spaces that I knew I was supposed to be in because of that dialogue, that inability of my teacher that day to own her own micro and macro aggressive behavior. And so, I'm a different person now, but when I did get into Harvard, I found my teacher on Facebook because some of you were like, what happened next, Dr. D? I found her on Facebook. Okay, that's what I did. I'm telling you, I'm being honest. Dialogue is a journey, folks. You arrive on your own timeline, so no judgments for where you are now. But there was a day in my life when I used to be vice president of Team Petty. Okay, I was fully ensconced in it, folks. I've graduated out of the club. But I found her, and I may or may not have sent 17 screenshots of my acceptance letter to Harvard. I may or may not have said, "You see me now?" But here's what that pettiness in the moment, right? Like, I'm calling it petty because I wasn't there for grace. I wasn't there for healing. I was there to prove a point. But that interaction, I think, sparked the whole thread of where I am now. If you are not willing to sit in the discomfort of building grace for folks who didn't know what they didn't know. And I'm not talking about coddling folks, but I'm talking about you can hold people accountable to what they don't know while building an empathy bridge. And so something happened. My teacher reached back out and I thought she was going to say, okay, great. And she said, "I'm just so sorry and I'd love to talk." Now, here's the thing, that teacher that I'm telling you about, this was another Black woman from East New York, Brooklyn, who had been a teen mom. You see where we're going here? She had internalized her own water and interpersonally regurgitated it on me, which made me create an internalized feeling of imposter syndrome. You see how that works? And she said to me, "When you told me all those things, when I heard you say Harvard and you wanted to go to the Mars and all of this, I saw myself in you. And I didn't know how to tell a child that all of those dreams that she had were going to face a barrier of systemic oppression and racism, and that your demography could potentially be your destiny." And I figured because I looked like you, that if I crushed you first, before the system crushed you, maybe it wouldn't feel so bad. So that's why I said what I said. Folks, she was trying to protect me. I still don't know how I feel about it, but I'm just here doing storytelling and truth telling to tell you that was a transformative moment because it taught me about accountability, and it actually showed me how systems of oppression could show up in people, even the ones who say they care about you. So from that moment, I realized we needed some tools. The ethos is that tool. You see, dialogue requires parameters to it. You can't walk into a dialogue assuming everybody wants the same outcome. You can't walk into a dialogue, folks, assuming closure. Closure is a construct. It doesn't exist. And so many of us only believe we're successful when things are closed. And that's also not true. Please accept and expect non-closure. And please receive that a dialogue not finished does not mean it was not successful. It just means you've percolated the space for another opportunity, because being committed to anti-racism means you don't opt out of it. You have to keep coming back to it over and over and over again. That's what builds your capacity to sit in the discomfort of this work, which allows us to have the conversations which will continue to visibilize those 4 eyes like we named. So my interaction, like I told you, with my elementary school teacher created this condition where I said, there's gotta be a way for harm to not have to happen first, right? In order for us to have a powerful dialogue. And so over my years of facilitation and support of culture, I've realized and built on that lesson, and it's manifested itself into the ethos. So ethos literally means an ongoing, continuous culture. That's what it is. You want to embody ethos at multiple levels. You should have this ethos in self, at the team level, and at the organizational level. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to describe the ethos for us, because these will be great tools to use throughout the day. And I'm going to end with extend care, because I think it's the hardest one of them all, right? That one has multiple pieces. Here are the goals of the ethos. The ethos allows you to manifest 4 cultural things. This is a great moment to grab your pen. 4 big things. The first one is it allows us to actively listen. The average adult attention span is 20 seconds. It's 5 to 7 words. So it's not that people aren't listening, but we're listening for resonance. You're listening to hear yourself in someone else's dialogue. And so if you can't say, me too, within 5 to 7 words, you're no longer actively listening, which means you can't build a bridge to empathy if you haven't actually heard what they said that is not in resonance to you. Dialogue isn't just about dialoguing and listening to the perspectives we agree with. It is also about sitting in the deep truth that there's learning to be had in the perspectives that don't resonate with us. The second thing that the ethos allows you to manifest is the ability to engage in humility. So remember, our first one was active listening. The second one is humility. This humility, though, is not don't be arrogant. This is your ability in dialogue to say, I don't know. I know why you don't want to say it though. We live in a cancel culture, don't we? The implications of telling people, I don't know. You could maybe lose your job, right? You could lose a relationship. You could have a difficult conversation with family. And I'm telling you though, there is a greater good on the other side of saying, I don't know, which is it creates the space for curiosity. If people think you know, they will implicate you in doing something that you really didn't know how to do. And then you know what happens? They think you're complicit in oppression, as opposed to knowing that you're truly just terrified to say, I don't know. And folks, if you struggle to be non-expert in front of people, that's your work today. That's your work all day today. Just lean in to non-expertise. I'm going to let us all off the hook by saying there is no such thing as expert when it comes to culture, folks. I am an expert, but I am not an expert, because I would have to meet all 9 billion people in the world to be expert. Is it billion, trillion? Who knows the number? 9 trillion? Somebody let me know when we get to the Q&A, right? But I don't know everybody in the world. And I will say I don't know. You know why? Because even in my expertise, I'm biased too. There are things that I might have said that I never even knew could be hurtful. And I'm willing to own that I don't know, because it's going to build the bridge to hold me accountable to knowing differently. That's the self-work meeting the outside work. The third thing that ethos allows you to do is it allows you to have a difficult conversation. I know this statement is probably going to feel a lot like therapy. It's not, but it will feel therapeutic. There is nothing wrong with disagreeing. Difficult conversations are not yelling. The reason it's difficult is when we both realize we've got water. And in that water, there were things that some of us knew and things that others didn't know, and pain that we might have caused that we didn't realize we caused. And sometimes there's guilt. But that's why it's difficult, not because there's yelling and it's inducing trauma. That is not a difficult conversation, folks. That's trauma. Okay? And then the fourth thing that we want to be able to do is to be able to build empathy. If this was the house that equity built, if this was the house that anti-racism built, empathy would be the roof. Active listening and difficult conversations would be the sides. And humility, this I don't know, that's the floor. And because that's the house, there have to be key things that we're doing on a day-to-day basis to sustain that house. And that's what these 6 things are in the ethos. So this first one, share your wisdom, you're going to experience a lot of that today. Sharing your wisdom is a lot about storytelling. And every single person here has wisdom to share. Every single person has wisdom. And if your belief, if you have internalized that your voice doesn't matter, if you have internalized that you have no wisdom to share, that's your work today. Sharing your wisdom is just telling people about your lived experiences. That's it. It's being willing to say, you know what, I never knew that. Let me give you a perfect example. I told you I'm from Brooklyn. You heard in my introduction, I went to Brandeis. On my first day of Brandeis, our professor asked us to go outside and sit on the grass, and I had a full panic attack. And you know, my class laughed at me because they were like, oh, she's from the city. You know, Waltham's not Brooklyn. And then I had to share some wisdom. And I was like, it's not that I don't like grass. I need you to understand, I'm an 80s baby. And I grew up in a community where all you ever saw in the grass was crack vials and heroin needles. I was not allowed to go anywhere near grass until I was about 15. I started college at 17. You see the point here? So I didn't bring out a book. I didn't produce a paper. I just said, I don't know if you know, and I'm about to tell you a little bit about how my life looked so that you can understand why that statement is hurtful to me. I just have no context with grass in a positive way. And now I think you can own your privilege, right? Privilege is not money. Privilege is something you don't have to worry about. There are people in my school who didn't have to worry about grass. They had the privilege to play on it, lay on it, picnic on it. And I didn't have that. But see, in that privilege, they made a statement that became microaggressive to me, and I was hurt. And I shared my wisdom to build an empathy bridge, not to demand an apology from them. That's what the goal of sharing your wisdom is. The next one, remember, we're going to do extend care last. The next one is lean into discomfort. That's your ability to sit in the fact that you can't assume the right to comfort when having a dialogue. You notice nothing in this ethos says safe space. Do you know why? Someone always feels unsafe in safe space. There is always some condition going on that you didn't know was going on because you had the privilege to not know. So it doesn't mean we need to be guilty. I'm just telling you, if you set the condition that everyone is supposed to be comfortable, you're going to have a whole bunch of comfortable conversations that are going to not lead to the dismantling of systems of oppression. Oppression has created the condition of comfort, which is why we want it. And I'm telling you, to combat it, we have to sit in discomfort. The next one is own your learning. You're going to have a lot of great conversations today, folks. You're going to have a lot of great conversations every day. And you know, at the end of the day, no one can own you actually doing that work but you. I love this one because this one is about your personal agency. You don't have to take it all. I'm giving you a 1-hour keynote. And if the only thing you remembered is share your wisdom and you own that and you did that every day, I'm proud of you because that's great work. Engaging in humble inquiry is the art of asking questions. You remember we said this ethos has to build a culture of curiosity? In your dialogue today, humble inquiry starts with the phrase, help me to understand. Help me to understand what you meant when you said those kids. Help me to understand what you meant when you said you've been warned about those people. You see, it's not snarky. It's not a snarky ask. It's a genuine curiosity. And I will tell you, just because you ask the question, please do not assume people will answer. Not everybody's able to meet you in your inquiry. But the fact that you ask creates a space for grace. But I also want you to know that just because you asked, it doesn't demand an answer. This next one is accept and expect non-closure. Similarly to what you've heard me say before, we cannot assume that we're going to close all of this work in one lifetime. Your children's children will still be having dialogue, and it's not because we weren't urgent for change. You know why? The last thing you want are urgent dialogues and urgent people with no skills to be urgent. Urgent people with no skills do harm. And you have to accept and expect non-closure on our growth edge to be able to learn. You can't learn and process and do and manifest all at the same time. So that's why I said, if you are intention to owning your learning, you will grow and you will change, but it may not be in the totality that you expect, but it's still wonderful and it's still impactful. And then this last one, extend care, which feels really apropos for where we are today. Extending care was not originally in the ethos, I'll be honest. The ethos didn't have it. I thought share your wisdom, discomfort, own your learning, engage and accept and expect was it. And then I had a difficult moment in Cambridge, okay? I was in a bathroom in Cambridge. And as you can all see, the reason my hair is down today, well, you can't see the reason my hair is down, but I'm telling you the reason my hair is down today was specifically for this moment. So my hair is very long. I'm gonna pull it to the front. So we're also having a dialogue about hair today, folks. You're welcome, right? So this is all my hair. I have locks. right? Which means these are not braids. This is all my hair. And I've been growing my hair for 14 years. So my hair, when I'm standing up, falls to the back of my legs, like probably 3 inches above my knees. It's that long. And I realized the longer it got, the more people like to touch it. And I realized that there had to be a way for me to give people feedback with love. This is what extend care is, folks. It's feedback with love. It's me holding you accountable to what you don't know, but I want to be really honest in why I had to create this ethos. Folks, if you don't know how systems of oppression work, you know what's in that ideology in the water. It often teaches us that Black folks are violent. It teaches us that Black women are aggressive and angry. It also teaches us a mindset about women that are not petite or people that are not small in general. Okay, so I'm 5'8". I'm a member of Team Thickums. Shout out to my Team Thickums out there, right? And I'm a Black woman. Nobody ever thinks I need help. And no one ever thinks that I'm the one who needs support. They think I'm the attacker. And I knew there had to be a way to give feedback without me having to fear for my life. I'm here to tell you folks, if you don't know how hard it is to give people feedback with love and hold them accountable in what they don't know as a person of color, I am here to tell you to potentially not do this well could be someone's life. So I don't want to scare us. I'm just also going to tell you in our day of dialogue, for those of you who are like, what is she talking about? There's some privilege here. If you've had the privilege to never fear for your life and giving feedback, I am telling you that is a full privilege that I don't have. I'm not mad at you for having it. I just want you to know you have it. And that's why this ethos has to exist. So I'm in this bathroom, and this is a bathroom that had 2 stalls, 1 sink. Now I came in the bathroom and the stall was full. And so I went in, and then I came out. And so now I'm at this 1 sink washing my hands. And then I hear the door behind me opens, and the woman who was in the bathroom next to me comes out of the bathroom. And, I told y'all I'm from Brooklyn. So I had been living at this point in Cambridge for about 6 or 7 years. So don't tell my family, but I had kind of let a little bit of my Brooklyn guard down. Okay, I wasn't as cautious as I am when I'm back home. And so that was probably my first mistake. I had my back turned to her, and out of nowhere, hands still moist. Y'all watching? This woman ran her hands just like this, the whole length of my hair, saying, "Oh, this is all your hair? I love your people's hair. It's so soft. I never thought your people could have soft hair like this. Oh my goodness. I wish I could do my hair like this." And then she went to the sink. Yes. She judged me and did all sorts of things and then went to the sink. So there's this moment, I'm standing in the bathroom. If any of you have ever seen Invasion of the Body Snatchers, okay, the original black and white version, not these new updates. There's the scene when they realize the humans are trying to fake them out, and they go, that face was the face I was making in the bathroom, like, because I know the implications of what she just did. And I realized she didn't know. You see, here was the hard part, because in the middle of all of that, I heard her saying, "I love your hair. I love your people's hair." But I don't think she realized how I truly felt. And this is where Extend Care got built. So the phrase, grab your pens, I notice, I wonder. Some of you may not like that. That's okay. This is a day of dialogue. You can disagree with me. We can agree to disagree. But I care about our agreeing to disagree for a greater good. Here's the greater good. The I notice statement is to literally tell people what happened. They don't know. That water has created a lack of proximity. People really don't know. We are more segregated than you could possibly imagine. The only reason people are proximate to each other is usually the media. And I don't think I have to talk about how the media creates biases and reifies the water. The I wonder is the curiosity. That's the humility. Because it's literally asking a question like, I wonder if you know what's happening here. And you know what that does? This is not about demanding an apology. This is not about telling people you forgive them. This one's going to feel really hard for you because it often has no closure. I'm not telling you to hug it out in a bathroom and then like swap numbers and in an ongoing way keep having conversations. I'm telling you to share your wisdom, do it with care, and walk away. Because if you were always accustomed to leading people to their anti-racism promised lands, they will never own it for themselves. That's why. So she's looking at me. She goes to the sink, she's washing her hands. And I said, "Excuse me." She turns around. I said, "I noticed that you came out of the bathroom and you didn't wash your hands. I noticed that you ran your hands through my hair 6 times. You ran it top to down 3 times. You flipped it to the front once. You ran it through once, and you shaggy dogged me 1 time. I heard you say your people, and I heard you say you wish you could do your hair like this. And I'm wondering if you know that I know that you're not racist. I'm wondering if you know that I know that you're very uninformed. But I'm wondering if you know that because this is all my hair, do you know how violated I feel? I'm wondering if you know that Black people do not have to wash our hair every day. We do not naturally produce oils in my hair. My hair will never get oily, folks. I have to add oil to my hair. I only wash my hair once a month. It takes 10 and a half hours to do my hair. And on a Tuesday at 5 o'clock, I'm wondering if you know that I'm now gonna have to strap my wrists, like essentially to my head, to try to get this all done in advance of tomorrow because your hands were wet when you ran your hands through my hair. And I'm wondering if you know that. And so you know what happened. So this was a white woman on the other side of me. She started hysterically crying. So I'm not saying that white women cry. What I am saying is the reason why I'm saying you know what happened, because I do think that it's hard for people to get feedback. People just assume you're going to cancel them. She was overwhelmed by that kind of, who's ever done that to you in a bathroom? Yes, I am that person though. I've also done this in Whole Foods over avocados. When people think I work at Whole Foods and ask me where avocados are, and I notice and wonder in aisle 3. Yes, I do, right on River Street. Yes. So I'm always thinking about that. And so she starts crying and she says, you know, I didn't mean it. And it all comes out, right? She takes one big breath and it's like, you know, I'm not racist and I swear, but this is the first time I ever met a Black person. I'm actually here visiting I'm from, I don't want to implicate anybody's state, right? Because I'm from this place and we actually don't have any Black people. I've only ever seen Black people on TV. And I see Whoopi Goldberg every day and I love her. And I know you're not Whoopi, but I've always wanted to touch hair like Whoopi's. And I just wanted to tell my girlfriends that I had a chance to meet a Black woman and her hair was really beautiful and was just like Whoopi's. I'm sorry. I'm not racist. Please forgive me. Extending care is not about forgiveness. It's about owning that you got some water. It's not about you needing to be forgiven, because you know why? When you crave forgiveness, you want me to let you off the hook. And if I let you off the hook, will you really own your learning? I'm not sure. And so I told her, I do not forgive you. Here's another therapeutic insert. Forgiveness is about you, folks. Forgiveness is your ability to own that the situation couldn't have been any different than what it was. And forgiveness is also not closure. But if you just forgive, how can people own? I'll let you sit in that. And so I told her, I said, I want you to have a really great day. And I told you this not because I'm going to put you on the news. I told you this because I know you didn't know, and I don't want you to go out here and hurt somebody or get hurt in your non-knowing. And I walked away. Accept and expect non-closure. Our last story, because we've heard a few. We know the water is real. We know there are parameters for how we can engage in dialogue through this ethos. We know at any given time, the 4 eyes are alive and well. They are trying to inhibit your ability to dialogue. They're trying to get you to cancel. They're trying to get you to not listen. They're trying to get you to not share your wisdom. You know why? Because if you actually do those things, you build community, and systems of oppression function on dysfunction of community and communication. And where has this ethos taken me, right? I created this ethos in 2017. And in 2018, like the extend care piece came in early 2018. And then my husband and I had a really revolutionary moment 2 summers ago in Colorado. And this is where I'll end the keynote, and we'll start to go into our Q&A, because I want you to have as much time as possible. You know how you can create something and you know it's going to serve a good on teams and in organizations, but you don't always think it's going to save your life or build a bridge for a tense moment. My husband and I drove cross country from New Hampshire, where we lived at that time, all the way to the Grand Canyon. We did it over 8 days. So drove one way, flew home. And I encountered the Klan. Yes, that Klan, the Ku Klux Klan, twice in 2018. In these here United States on that trip. The first time was in upstate New York. Now, as a New York City person, I had never been upstate New York, and I'm not saying upstate is racist, and I fully bumped into a Klan group up there. And the second time was in Colorado. And so my husband and I have a dog. Her name is Scooter. She's a mini poodle. She's here with us right now. You just can't see her. She's underneath my desk. And we drove into this town, and this was a town that the whole population of the town was a jail. And so there was signs all over the road that said, don't pick up hitchhikers. Now, my husband and I are kind of rogue when we go traveling. We literally put Waze on and go. For some of you who are planners, you're like, how? Yes, we are those people. We are too structured in life, so vacations are unstructured. So we just had a map and we just drove. So it was like stop wherever, go wherever, get gas wherever, eat wherever. And this is how we ended up in this small town. And we pulled into this gas station, and there was a big sign on the door that said no cloaks, no hoods. Now, we had rented a Jeep, y'all. We rented a Jeep. So the top was off. We took the top off, okay? So we're feeling great. There's 2 Black people and this Black dog in the back seat. And the shop owner comes out of the front door with a giant shotgun in his hands. He's looking at us, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what is this? And he comes over with a shotgun slung. He's missing all his teeth. And he's like, who were you here to visit at the prison? And I said, we not visiting anybody at the prison. We're just on vacation. Like, we're just here to get gas. But me being me, right? It's me being me. This man's got a shotgun. My husband's trying to quick pump this gas because we really were about to, like, the car was about to spurt her off. And I said, here's a little humble inquiry. I said, excuse me, can you help me to understand the sign on the door? Like, I understand no hoods, right? But no cloaks. I'm like, is this an anti-wizard association? Is this the place for muggles only, right? Like, I'm joking with him. And he kind of chuckles and he said, I've never had anybody ask me that. And I said, well, I'm curious because it sounds important. It's actually no cloaks is bigger than no hoods. And he says, yeah. He goes, this is a meth town. There are a lot of folks in the Brotherhood who are meth addicts. And I said, the Klan? He said, listen, we prefer to not be called the Klan. We are more like brothers. So this is me as a Black woman having a full conversation with, he was like, we prefer to be called the Brotherhood and not the Klan. So I'm building some empathy that I never thought I would build. And I'm like, So my husband's pumping the gas faster, right? Because he's still got the shotgun out. And he says, the brothers, they get high and then they come in the store in their garments and their cloaks and they rob me. And he goes, if I'm gonna shoot anybody, I want to know who I'm shooting. So that's why that cloak is there. I mean, that's why it says no cloaks. And I'm like, wow, I grew up someplace that had a lot of people who were on drugs too. I know what it's like to have your friends and family not be the people you thought you once knew, right? They're in process. And he goes, really? And I said, really? And I said, it sounds pretty difficult. So now the gas is done. And he looks over in the car and he says, is that a dog? Is that a poodle? And I said, yeah, she's a little mini poodle. He goes, she sure is cute. Do you mind if I pet her? I'm like, wait a minute. And so I cracked this joke that I never thought I would crack, which was, I was like, are you telling me in your brotherhood that you've been fully sanctioned to pet black dogs? Are you gonna get in trouble for this? And you know, he looked at me and he put the shotgun down and he just started cracking up. And I said, you can look at her, but I don't feel comfortable with anybody holding a shotgun, holding my fur baby, okay? That's my fur child. Like, we're not doing this. And he even chuckled at that. And now my husband's looking at me, I'm looking at the dog's looking at me, and we're all looking at him. And then he says something, he goes, you know what? He goes, I never met any of you people like who weren't at the jail. But y'all seem pretty nice. So I'm gonna tell you something. I'm the gatekeeper for this town. Like, I'm the person who's supposed to kind of stop folks we don't want coming in. But like, let me tell you what, I could tell y'all just getting gas, and I've never had anybody like say to me what you said. And I told you I was a Klansman and, well, excuse me, a brother, right? And you didn't get upset. You didn't tell me shame on you. And I said, I'm not here to critique what you believe because I know I'm not going to change what you believe. I'm just trying to ensure that we can have a moment where you understand we have a shared humanity. I fully disagree with everything you believe in, but clearly we had a shared humanity enough for you to even answer my question. And that's why. And he says, you know what? That's wonderful to hear that. He goes, don't make a left though when you come out of this gas station. He goes, because if you go into the town, everybody's going to know that I let y'all people in, and not everybody is as, you know, like willing to talk like me. So what I want y'all to do is just make a right, get straight back up on that highway, and you go on and have a good time in the Grand Canyon and just forget about our little town. So in our difference, he kept us safe. And I want us to sit in that. And I hope that the stories of my childhood and that bathroom and that Klansman / brother person are enough to show you that the dialogue will never be easy. But there is such a greater good on the other side of it. And that is true anti-racist practice, not a book. So thank you to everyone for this time. I particularly, Rivka, Amy, our interpreter team, in my moments of rapid talking, y'all have been with me the whole time. And I see you and I appreciate you, and it means so much. And I hope that this presentation, this keynote has been powerful for you as we step into this next phase of dialogue for the day. Sit in it, enjoy the discomfort of it, and be okay with the non-closure of it, folks, because that's the work. Thank you. Love to hear some of your questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Amante-Jackson. So one of the first questions that people really wanted to know more about was how you overcome the very short adult attention span that you mentioned. Like, how do you truly listen without constantly, for example, trying to find commonalities or relating it back to you?
Mm-hmm. That's a great first question, Bianca, and thank you to everyone watching. There are only two ways to keep an adult's attention when it doesn't resonate. The first one is storytelling. That's why I told you so many stories today. It's not because I wanted to hear myself talk about myself. You ever wonder how enthralled children get and adults get when you talk to them about somebody else's story? That. So storytelling creates resonance even if there's nothing in common, because people just feel honored to hear the share, and it keeps their attention for up to 2.5 hours. The second way is a purpose-driven statement. It's a why statement. People resonate with whys, not with whats. So a what is, I want to be anti-racist. That's a what. The why is, I am committed to being anti-racist because I believe that humanity still has a shot. You hear that? If I start with, I believe humanity still has a shot, how many people on this call are going, me too? I haven't even told you what I think it's going to take to get us there. So it's a purpose-driven statement. And for those of you who want to explore more of that work, I'm the only Darnisa Amante or only Darnisa Amante-Jackson in the world. There is a why video of me on YouTube. You can just literally Google Darnisa Amante why, and it's a 7-minute video that teaches you how to create your own why. So hopefully that's helpful. And those are the statements that bring people to you.
Thank you so much. And I realized I forgot to introduce myself. So hi, everyone. I'm Bianca. I'm a current third-year graduate student in the biological engineering PhD program here at MIT. So kind of building off the first question, another person really wanted to know how you developed this like love that you express to strangers, to our audience here, that makes you comfortable sharing those stories. And also, kind of along those lines, how do you avoid being consumed by anger, and how do you bring grace, as you say?
Hmm. Well, the first thing I think for me was the mindset that I wanted to have as a practitioner that's leading teams through difficult conversations. So I knew it was really important for me to be centered. So things that helped that, meditation, therapy, and um, the biggest thing for me was traveling, and I don't mean internationally. Over 4 years with DEEP and DCCP, I have seen 47 states. And I realized that every state has the same challenges. The challenges are the same. And we don't even know it. So that was the first big realization was, oh, this is bigger than here. This is all of it. And then the second thing I said was, what's the thing that people fear the most that would be most impactful if I showed up not in that? And I realized what it means to be human is to be afraid of not being in community. And I didn't want people to feel like because they didn't know they couldn't be in community. So I practiced listening to perspectives that had nothing to do with anything I've ever talked about. I think New Hampshire, living in New Hampshire for 4 years was a huge growth edge for me too. I met a lot of people who had never met Black people. I had a lot of conversations with people who were like, so what are you people doing here? When are you leaving? And I said, right, if I get snarky, if I shut them down, where's the moment for learning? So I think maybe that's my educator heart. I am more committed to a common understanding of our challenges of inequity than I am to yelling one person or a group down. That doesn't build our capacity to do the work. So those are things that have helped me. So I'll sum it up for those of you who like the bullet points. Lean into perspectives that you don't know at all and get comfortable not trying to just refute and rebuke them. Like, what would it mean for you to just sit and to receive it and to engage in humble inquiry, right? Help me to understand, or help me to understand more about, or I'm wondering. And then ask yourself, what's the way you want to continuously show up in the work that allows you to deepen connection to humanity? I'm still on my way, but I'm further along because I've been blessed to have really, really hard conversations that make me realize people just want to know better to do better. 98% of this country and the world are just people who are uninformed and not ignorant. And when you realize that, it's a different space because now I'm not angry. I'm in this deep understanding that we've all been robbed of the collective ability to know each other, and that oppression oppresses universally. It just looks different for different groups.
And would you be able to speak towards perhaps a frustrating moment you've encountered in such dialogues and how you dealt with it?
I would say the frustrating moment is when bias is showing up on me in the moment when I'm engaging in a culture of care. So, for example, not so much at work anymore because I have my own businesses, right? We've manifested a culture that doesn't feel anything probably like what traditional culture feels like. Um, but it's the harder part when I'm out in the world and I engage in humble inquiry, or I'll ask a question and then people will put that anti-Black bias on me and they'll say, listen, this is not always a Black-white thing. Why does it always have to be about race? I get frustrated. And there are two things I want to say. So I'm trying to think of which one I want to say. I get frustrated when even in your grace and understanding, people are still wholly committed to their worldview. Like, I'm not here to change you. I'm just here to expand the perspective. But that's really hard to do when people believe that you're approaching them from a place of dislike or hurt or anger. So those are the moments. But like I said, the way that I shift that for me is, Darnisa, it's not that you said the wrong thing. They just weren't ready to receive it yet. And for some of you who've had some really difficult conversations with your family, some of us might not even be talking to family anymore. I need you to tell yourselves, it could be maybe I didn't say it the way it could have been said. Now we've got some new tools, but also just because you've arrived doesn't mean they're ready yet. Accept and expect non-closure on people's growth journey, and don't try to own their growth for them.
So for those of us who have some growing to do you have advice on how we can gracefully recover, let's say, when we make mistakes?
I think the first one is being able to implicate yourself as imperfect. Perfectionism is a construct. Let it go. Let me raise my voice. Rivka, this is you and me, partner, and let it go. Let it go. There is no such thing as perfect. There is never such a thing as a perfect delivery. All you can ever do is show up and be the best you are with whatever you know and have in this moment. So if you're always setting yourself up to compare yourself to some endpoint that doesn't exist, you are always going to be perpetually frustrated with yourself that you didn't do it the right way. I'm telling you, there is no such thing as a right way. There are some best practices that each of us will wield differently. The ethos isn't the only way, but it's a really powerful way, for example, to have a conversation. But if you didn't know the ethos yesterday, don't come in here today and blame yourself for the thing you didn't know before you got here. Implicate yourself in your non-knowing and own and get curious about how you can learn more or be in more conversation. Or here's the second part. If you realize later that you might have said something in a way that could have been micro or macro aggressive to someone, don't go back and try to start from, I'm so sorry and I didn't mean it, because you know what that does? That minimizes the impact of what they experienced. What you need to do is go back and say, I'm owning that I've created harm, which was not my intention, and I am committed to continuing to be in understanding and community with you so that that harm does not happen in the same way again. That's the statement. Because we will hurt again. We are imperfect people doing imperfect work. Imperfect is the goal. So it's not about the failing, it's how did you get up from the fail? How did you own the fail? How did you iterate? And I don't even like to call them failures, I like to call them do differentlys. See, language is everything. Telling yourself I have a do differently feels a lot different than saying I failed. Failing sounds like it's done. Do differently feels like there's work to be done. And I hope that that's helpful.
And switching gears for a moment, we're here at an elite institution, MIT. And I know that you have a lot of experience in elite institutions. So someone wanted to know how they could help identify points of like institutional forms of oppression that work against them, especially because at MIT, you often hear like, this is the MIT way, you know, this is how we've always done things.
I would say thank you to whomever asked that question. You've got a copy of the slides. That 4 eyes slide is a full tool. You can't start with institution without naming ideology, okay? So the best way to start is you ask the question, what are the implicit and explicit beliefs that we hold at this elite institution? Here are some examples, because I know some of you are like, okay, great, Dr. D, what's the example? So an example could be like, we've qualified best. We believe best has a look. Maybe best has a gender. One belief could be elitism, classism. One belief could be, I mean, there's tons, right? And then remember, your institutional practices are just the way your beliefs have been manifested. So if you start with the practices first, it doesn't always allow you to unearth the beliefs. Name all the beliefs that you can, and then ask yourself, what policies have we created that reify, lift up, and uphold these beliefs? So for example, I'm gonna give the little like the push with love one. An ideological belief is that people are better than other people and that there's a way to sort people. And how that's been institutionalized usually comes through standardized testing, whether it be the GRE, the GMAT, the SAT. And so the SAT is an institutionalized form of our own ideological beliefs that people can be sorted, that there are levels of intelligence. But then how is it institutionally upheld? We use this test, which elite universities did not create, to become the gateway, right? This is now the bar for how we qualify if you're worthy of this eliteness. That's where I would start.
Thank you. And this is the last question of the Q&A. A person wanted to say, thank you so much for your talk. Could you speak a bit to how people of color can deal with the deafening silence that they hear from their white colleagues throughout today, throughout the year, and during these continued conversations?
I think for communities of color, I know particularly for me, I can't speak on all people of color, but I can speak on what's been helpful for me. I've stopped expecting white people to speak, right? I'm owning that there is work that I can still do, that I still have agency to do. So affinity space. There is so much work that people of color have to do to unpack our own internalized oppressions that we put on other people. I've been focusing on growing on myself because I realize like I am continuing to give power to whiteness by denying myself and my self-care. So I start with my own self-care and affinity space, and then I am committed to leading conversations and to being in difficult conversations across difference to build empathy with white community, for them to understand the nature of the struggle. I've created frameworks to support organizations that are predominantly white in like continuing to diversify. So I feel like that is how I have relinquished the need to hear every white person speak. I just committed myself to changing the systems that create this privilege. I manage my expectations is the answer to this question. So self-care first, because a denial of self as a person of color is the goal of systemic oppression. If we deny ourselves, we die. And if we die, we have no voice to give. And if you have no voice to give, then there can be no agency, there can be no empathy, and there can be no increased proximity. So yeah, I take a lot of vacations. Sometimes they're just in my house so that I can actually have the energy to move systems. And that's how.
Thank you so much for your time today and your excellent presentation, Dr. Amante-Jackson. So right now we'll have a short break until 10:40 a.m. Eastern Time, when we'll have our first set of concurrent sessions. So the Zoom links for these sessions should be found on the Day of Dialogue webpage. The URL will also be posted in the question and answer section. Thank you.